Dividend growth investing is one of the most popular forms of investing out there, particularly because the thought of receiving the truly passive income in the form of dividends is pretty attractive. The thought of being able to receive enough money in dividends to either pay most or all of your expenses and make enough money to live a fuller is the dream of everyone. The best part is that you don't even have to go to the job that you hate. It is a pretty big dream to a lot of people, but there is a serious drawback to dividend growth investing. And if you've seen other YouTube videos out there, you might already know what I'm talking about. And that is to be able to live off dividends, either partially or completely, for your income requires a massive stock portfolio. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, or in some instances with YouTube dividend investors, I've seen over $1 million in stocks and ETFs. In order to reach that point, needless to say, this is pretty discouraging to a significant amount of investors out there. Tell me if the story sounds a little familiar to you. Let's say you're 30 years old and you make the decision that you want to be a dividend growth investor. You decide to take $10,000 in your savings account and put it into one of the most popular dividend growth stocks out there, which is Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson has consistently raised their dividend amount every year for the last 58 years along with its stock price appreciation. It seems like a no-brainer that this is a really solid investment for a dividend growth investor. Before you know it, you're on your way to creating a more prosperous future full of passive income. But then it dawns on you that Johnson & Johnson stock only has a dividend yield of 2.48% with the currently trading at $171.08 per share. That means that every quarter you're only receiving $1.01 per share that you own. That comes out to a little over 33 cents a month for every share of Johnson & Johnson that you own. If you invested $10,000 into Johnson & Johnson at $166.48 per share, that will be enough for you to buy 60 shares. With 60 shares, you'd be making $60.60 every quarter, or a little over $20 a month. Earning $20 every month after investing enough money to buy a really decent used car doesn't sound so great, does it? But now, here is the key point behind dividend growth investing. Johnson & Johnson raises their dividends every year. So that means that as long as the company doesn't fall on hard times, they're going to continue to raise that dividend every year. So you just got to have enough patience and eventually you'll start getting paid more dividends as time goes on. Let's say you then decide to see just how much Johnson & Johnson typically raises their dividend every year. So you go online and you realize that they have a history of raising their dividends every year by a measly 46 cents per year. If we use a dividend calculator, we can estimate how much money we'll have in the future with this investment. Johnson & Johnson stock has an annual dividend growth rate of roughly 6.13, according to Seeking Alpha, which will help us determine how much our dividends will grow. Using our $10,000 example, after 40 years of waiting, you'll have earned a measly $41,138.62 in dividends if you didn't reinvest them. If you did decide to reinvest those dividends, or in other words, you chose not to spend a penny of your dividend income on something you really wanted, like a new car or a nice vacation, or simply paying your bills for 40 years and just kept buying more and more shares, you will have made $64,231.12 in dividends. If you think Johnson & Johnson is the exception, here you're going to find a very similar pattern with other really popular dividend growth stocks. Let's take a look at some other really popular dividend stocks out there and see how Johnson & Johnson compares with them. Here we have the 3M company, which is another very popular dividend growth stock. It currently has a dividend yield of only 3.36%, Here's Procter & Gamble, which currently has a dividend yield of 2.4%, McDonald's 2.21%, Emerson Electric 2.2%, and the list goes on. And on now, sure, you can keep buying more and more shares of Johnson & Johnson stock, as well as other dividend growth stocks, as we talked about over the next few decades, but you realize that the goal of being able to live off dividends either partially or completely for your income is starting to look more impossible. Want to achieve this before you're significantly older, knowing this information caused a lot of dividend investors to eventually stop dividend growth investing altogether because they realize that their dream of completely living off dividends won't be achievable until they are gray-haired and mostly done with their lives, not to mention if you're already approaching or at retirement age already. You don't have decades to wait for your Johnson & Johnson dividends to appreciate. You're looking for investments that offer you high amounts of dividend income now, as opposed to someday later, maybe you'll have more than $10,000 to invest. But again, unless you're fortunate enough to have millions of dollars saved up, being a dividend growth investor is not going to be an ideal situation. Being a dividend growth investor only works for two types of people: those who already have millions of dollars to invest, or people who are really young and are willing to sacrifice a significant amount while they're young, so that they can be wealthy when they're too old to actually enjoy living off their dividend income. Now, I totally get that some dividend investors want to live like Warren Buffett. They just want to keep investing and basically running up the score clock. But remember, Warren Buffett doesn't exactly spend a lot of his money. He lives very frugally. Personally, I'm not the kind of person who wants to save as much as possible and then die without enjoying it. So, with that being said, if you want to start earning high amounts of dividend income every month, now as opposed to decades in the future, it's clear that you're going to need to target different types of investments. Obviously, you'll need to set your sights on investments that have higher yields. That's really a no brainer. But there are some important things to keep in mind, like avoiding stocks and funds that are steadily decreasing their dividend distributions, or investing in companies that are very, very high risk. Ask me what the best kind of investment is for someone who's looking for not only high dividend income but also growth in its distribution amounts and share price. And I'm convinced the absolute best investment that meets those qualifications is covered call ETFs. This is somewhat of a newer type of investment that hasn't become mainstream yet, but they're a gold mine for dividends. I've been asked what I'd invest in if I only had $100 or $1,000, and covered call ETFs would always be my first pick. Probably the most well-known covered call ETF out there will be QYLD, which currently has a dividend yield of 11.49% and pays dividends every month as opposed to every quarter. Key to understanding how these ETFs generate such a high amount of dividends is to basically understand how options work. If you're interested, just let me know in the comment section below. I will make a video about it. But to give you a brief summary, these ETFs follow a covered call investment strategy in which the fund buys a group of stocks in the Nasdaq 100, and then they also sell call options that correspond to the basket of stocks. These options are then sold every month, and the option premiums that are earned are passed on to investors in the form of dividends. As a result of what we as investors get are extremely high dividend distributions every single month, with growth according to Seeking Alpha. QYLD has grown its dividend for over 2 years so far. And remember, that's already with a current dividend yield of 11.49%. Taking our original 10,000 example, if you put it all into QYLD at its current share price of $22.56 per share, you would have enough money to buy 443 shares at its current share price with a yield of 11.49. 443 shares will earn you roughly $101.13 every month. That's a whole lot better than Johnson & Johnson's 20 and 20 cents per month, isn't it? And if you chose to reinvest those dividends every month, think of how incredible that snowball effect will be in building up a massive. Alternatively, you could choose to reinvest your dividends amounts and spend them other months until you've reached the point where you can fully live off your dividend income. Here is another great type of investment that pays higher dividends to investors. They're called BDCs, or business development companies. They've been around since 1980, and they're basically companies that provide financing to small and medium-sized businesses in order to help them grow in return for receiving financing. These small businesses are required to pay a certain amount of their profits to the BDCs, and then, as required by law, the BDCs must pay 90 of the money they receive from these small businesses back to shareholders in the form of dividends. It's not unusual for BDCs to have dividend yields of over 8%, some of them pay monthly, but for the majority they typically pay quarterly, which still isn't bad if it's still paying massive dividends, right? Two stocks in the BDC sector that really stand out to me. One is Ares Capital, which happens to be the biggest business development company out there. This one has a massive dividend yield of 8.18%. Another one I really like is New Tech. This stock has had a pretty sizable dividend increase. Covered call ETFs and BDCs are only some of the investment types out there that pay large amounts of dividends. There's more out there that are worth looking into, such as real estate investment trusts, closed-end funds, master limited partnerships, split and share funds, among other things, is primarily what my channel revolves around, which is aggressively dividend investing. I primarily like to cover these type of higher yielding investments for people who like this method for investing. Bottom line is this. If you want to live off your dividends much sooner in life, be sure to target specific alternatives, lesser known types of higher paying investments. Reinvest those dividends as often as possible to build up your dividend portfolio significantly faster, or spend your dividends in some months like on a nice vacation and choose to reinvest in other months. You'll be surprised how much more motivated you'll be to be a dividend investor when using this strategy. I don't know about you, but if I logged into my brokerage account and saw that Johnson & Johnson paid me $20, that doesn't really motivate me as much to keep it up. If I were to see QILD paying me $102 every month, there is definitely an emotional factor to dividend investing this way. Okay, that's going to wrap up today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If this video benefited you in any sort of way, please click the like button below and also subscribe to the channel if you want to see more high dividend investing strategy videos. It'll just let me know that there is a sizable enough audience out there who wants this kind of content, and I'll continue to provide you all with that. Okay, thanks again guys, and I'll catch you next time. See you soon. Bye!